Hey YouTube world, this is my first video. I am so inspired by all of you out there that make just the coolest stuff that I really wanted to share my experience and my life in my garage. I have such a great creative space and I just love making all kinds of things. You know, right now I'm into making new furniture with wood and metal and really exploring all that negative space with steel. So welcome to my garage, and here's one of my projects, and I hope you like it. So I pulled about a dozen slabs out of the kiln, and this one's really nice. I think it's maple. It's got a lot of rot. It's got this really cool, interesting root on the end. So yeah, chiseled off the bark, and I was trying to save as much as I could of that interesting wood in the middle, but it's just way too rotted, and I wound up grinding all of it out and creating some nice open spaces in the sides and between the body of the tree and the root. So I use all kinds of angle grinders and circular rasps, and I use my die grinder with some rasp attachments on it. So there's some really nice shape to the wood. There's a live section and a dead section where it was just devastated by termites, and very often I'll grind that away, but I really wanted to keep it, so you can harden it up with some wood hardener, but it adds a lot of character. So here I used planer and belt sander, hand sanders to clean up the top and bottom surfaces. I sprayed it down with a little water to make the grain pop a little bit and see what I'm working with. And there's just so much character to this, so many little nooks and crannies and interesting parts. Here I use a little mineral oil on my bit when I grind, because as you can see, it keeps the bit really clean. It doesn't get all gummed up. And I have lots of assortment of flap discs and sanders to get into all the little tight spots. And this flap disc coming up here is really nice. It's really great for those uneven surfaces. It works really well along the sides to get all the tight spots. So I didn't like that square end, so I decided to round off both ends. And I just used my jigsaw to kind of cut it around and then cut a bevel on it. And then I used the circular rasp to clean it up. But you got to be super careful with this. You see, I put a block on the rasp to protect my fingers. I've come really close to losing a finger with that guy. So I bought these gloves. These are actually Kevlar reinforced gloves, and I'll include a link to them in the bottom. And they've saved my fingers quite a few times. So they're really great piece of gear to have in the shop. So yeah, I polished this up, rounded those corners nicely. They're nice and smooth with the rasp and sanding. So much sanding on this piece, days of sanding. So I had to flatten the bottom because these are some of the different bits I use. 3-end, 4-end bits, depending on the type of wood I'm working with, because of the resistance. But I had to flatten the bottom because when I put the metal base on it, you can shim the base or route slots, but I wanted it to just fit nice and flat on the surface. So I flattened out the bottom with the router sled, and it just needs some sanding here. So I hit it with the belt sander, and that cleaned up most of it. So here you'll see when I inset the metal that I need to route slots at a certain depth so it matches. So in order to keep the depth at the right level, I made that little jig, and I cut templates out of acrylic, and then I go in and fit it all together. And once it fits nice, I'll go back and I'll cut that out of metal. So here I am using that same jig for the other side, that other void that I had to grind away. and I mix my own shellac. Make a 3-pound mix of de-waxed shellac, and I coat things quite a few times during the course to keep it from absorbing water and warping. So here I am plasma cutting this 1/4-inch plate steel, and I had traced the outline on the steel, and it's I just love using the plasma cutter. It's such a nice tool. It lets you really free flow, and if you keep the tool clean, you can really go nice and smoothly around the metal without having to stop and start too many times. And that slag, it's really pretty. Sometimes I have a table that I left it on, but you can just knock it right off. You don't have to use a grinder to take it off. Just use the end of a chisel, and it just pops right off. So here now, it took a little bit of grinding and fitting to get the metal to fit in there the way I wanted it to, and it went in there nice, and you can see how it fits into the slots. I didn't like that little tail on the end there, so just marked it and went back to the grinder and just cleaned it off. And then I go around all the edges and grind them and smooth them and polish them. A combination of angle grinders and flat bits, and this resurfacer. Love this little tool. It works really well. I use the paint stripper roll to get most of the surface dirt off. But you'll see I also soak these things in vinegar. And that's a little bit later in the video here. And then I didn't really like the shape, so I kind of marked it out, reshaped it. And this is a contour gauge that I made myself, just a bunch of steel wire and a couple of pieces of aluminum, and I was able to make a little contour gauge. So here I cut the pieces back out of this guy, and then here's the back side that I needed to get the scale off the back. So basically you just put it in some vinegar for about 4 hours, and look at that, it just comes off with a wire brush, takes the scale right off. You don't have to grind or polish or anything. Same thing with this black pipe, regular black pipe. Just laid it in there, rolled it around, let it sit for about 4 or 5 hours, and then I go back and just brush it off. And you can see where these pieces, they set in nicely. This is the bottom side. Now I had to cut a couple little brackets to fit these guys in there to hold them in place. So I put them in place, set them in, mark it, and then go back in there with a Dremel and clean out a place where I can set that bracket in. Then I go back and just chisel it away to clean it up. Then I set it, mark the bracket. This is the other side. And then I did a little spot welding, and you can see there's a lot of spark coming out of there. It turns out I ran out of MIG gas just as I started doing this, and had to switch over to flux core. And I hate using flux core. It makes such a mess. A little bit later, I switch over to stick, because I like using stick. I prefer that over flux core, but I don't know. I just did this piece with flux core. And then I put like a 400 grit, or actually this looks like it's probably 180 grit to get the major scratches out of the steel, and then I'll work my way up to maybe 400. And this is the sanding roll on the surfacer, and you can see the shine, if you can see my reflection in it. What a nice finish it puts on that steel. And then you have all these holes and cracks from the termites, and you can see clearly on the left side there that wood is completely dead from termites. So I coat it with shellac every time I sand it. And now I have to mask everything off, because I use a polyester resin to fill little cracks and holes. Sometimes I'll use epoxy, but polyester resin is nice for these small little things. It cures in about 15 minutes. It's kind of like Bondo. And here's that black pipe that I pulled out of the vinegar bath. And now I'm just cutting the tabs that are going to get welded onto the legs. I have to attach the legs to the bottom separately. So you'll see why I have to put wood into the middle of the legs. So now I just made this little jig piece of wood that I cut out. I use it on my plasma cutter, and lets me cut a little semicircle there that I can fit these tabs onto the legs and weld them together. So I want the top of the leg open so I can drop some wood in there. So now I use the plasma cutter and cut some nice shapes, just hand cutting shapes out of the sides of the legs so I can see through them. And you'll see how that looks later with the when I add some wood into the middle. And I just decided to use a single beam down the middle. So I drilled some holes. It's 1/8 inch, 1.5 inch steel. So I had to drill, I think I drilled 4 or 5 holes down the center, evenly spaced out, and then sink them into the wood because I'm going to use and there I countersink those holes into the wood. So when I drive these nuts in, I put a little bit of cyanoacrylate on them. It helps to drive them because it's gives it a little bit of a slick surface to drive it in smoothly. And then once it's in there, it holds it in there solid. It's not going to work its way out. And also, if you're in a little bit of soft wood, it soaks into the soft wood and hardens that wood a bit. So now I just used a 1/4 inch plate steel and marked off these little tabs off that center where I'm going to attach the legs. It really wasn't necessary. I probably could have attached the legs directly to the bottom of the table, but I kind of like the idea of giving that, having the two parts separate. And here I use a letter punch. When I mark my parts, you can see you mark it with a Sharpie, and that Sharpie's going to just come off when you least expect it, and then you lose track of what's what. So I punch everything with A, B, C, D, E, or whatever, just so I can match my parts up. When you sand it, that those punched in letters just stay. So now here you see I switched over to stick to weld this 1/4 inch steel. It would be an insult to welders to call myself a welder, but I get the job done. I am an excellent grinder, however. And here are those legs with the cutouts, and I just drill some holes to match them up and fit them to that center rod. Now I went back and took all that tape off and sanded the polyester resin. And then I go back, and of course, every time I do this, I give it another coat of shellac. This is probably a 2-pound cut. And, I let this dry for quite a bit. Again, you have to use de-wax shellac. Always use de-wax shellac. The Zinsser shellac is not de-waxed. However, if you buy it in a spray can, for some reason it's de-waxed. But if you buy it regular Zinsser, unless you buy the sealer, it's not de-waxed. Only the sealer is de-waxed. And now I put some wood dowels in the center of those legs to fill. I used oak, but later I changed it over and put some legs, little adjustable legs, feet in the bottom. And this is spreading Rubio Monocoat. So I use the Rubio Monocoat 2C Pure. I spread it on there, get in all the nooks and crannies, and then wipe it off. And it's true what they say, that you can put too much on, but you can never wipe too much off. So make sure that when you're wiping it down, you wipe it off, you wipe it all off. You got to let it sit for about 15-20 minutes, let it soak in nice, and then you go back, wipe it off with a towel, and usually a cotton cloth. and then I polish it up. And you can polish it with a buffer, but I like to kind of polish it up by hand. But I really love the smoothness. And you see I anchored the steel in. And this is the final product here. This guy looks just great. I'm happy with how it came out. It's really rock solid. It feels smooth as silk when you run your hand across it. It's a really nice satin finish. And the Rubio provides a really nice bit of protection. And it's going to last a long time. You know, you spill and you can see where I filled those holes with the polyester. That polyester has a sparkle. You don't see it on the video, but it's got a little bit of a sparkle to it because of the way I mixed it in. And there are those legs. I later replaced the wood in there with maple because it matched better. This oak was a little bit too red. It was a red oak. So I just swapped those out. So I hope you like the work. I'm still trying to figure this stuff out. Of course, this is, as I said, is my first one. And I'll try to list as many tools and things that I used, materials in the bottom. But I hope you like it. And I need your comments, I need your feedback, what you want to see more of, less of. Just keep creating out there. Again, I love watching all the stuff that everybody's making out there. And it really inspires me to do more and to work harder and work better. So cheers to everybody.